Saraswatim Vyasam
Divim Saraswati Vyasam
Tato Jaya Mudiraye
Tato Jaya Mudiraye
Nasta Prashva Badrishu
Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke
Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki
Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki.
Before reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer his respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest of human beings, unto Goddess Saraswati, Mother Saraswati, the Goddess of Learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance to the classes of Srimad Bhagavatam, and by rendering service to the holy Vaishnavas, almost everything what is troublesome for the heart is will be gradually vanquished, and the loving devotional service will become an irrevocable fact. Thank you very much for giving me this honor to read from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, and please give me your blessings that I can do it for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada and Shri Guru Parampara, and please forgive me the mistakes that I may do. So we are reading Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. This chapter is called Stay High Forever, and we are in New York in the year of 1966, isn't it? Yes, in October 1966. So we were reading last time how this Harinams in Tompkins Square Park started, and the programs in the where Srila Prabhupada was reading at the storefront on the 2nd Avenue, and how some young spiritual people were coming. So we start from October 19. It was Monday evening after the Sunday Kirtan in the park, and Dan arrived at the storefront for Kirtan. The Kirtan was in full swing, and when he entered, the first thing he noticed was some people playing on the inners of an upright piano, leaning against the wall near the door. A boy handed him some wooden sticks, and he sat down and joined in the Kirtan. Then came the Swami's lecture, which Dan thought was long and serious, about how sexual desire causes bondage and suffering. The temple was crowded and stuffy, and Dan was shocked by the lecture, but he stayed on because he knew there would be another Kirtan. He felt uneasy that the Swami's followers were all celibate, but because he liked the Kirtans, he resolved to keep coming. The Swami wasn't quite what Dan had expected. He had imagined something of a light-hearted Zen Roshi, laughing and joking, with sparkling eyes and words filled with paradoxes. But he found the Swami just the opposite, very straightforward and even cutting in his speech, and his mouth turned down at the corners, making him look mournful. Dan happily took to the Kirtans, thinking they would aid his impersonal meditation, but the lectures kept stressing that God was a person. Dan resisted. He mentally debated with Prabhupada. He was partial to Dr. Radhakrishnan's interpretation of the Gita, and yet the Swami often launched ruthless attacks against such impersonal ideas. Gradually, Dan saw his impersonal barrier crumble, and he came to admit that on every count, the Swami was right. Judy began attending both the morning and evening classes, She had to rise by 5 o'clock to get to the storefront on time, and her mother and father protested. But Judy didn't care. She would ride an hour and a half on the subway before dawn downtown to the Swami's meetings, where she would be the only girl present. When the Swami heard that Judy was an art student, he asked her to paint for Krishna. She set up a canvas in the front room of the apartment, and under his guidance, she began painting. For her first assignment, he asked her to paint a portrait of his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He gave her a photo and instructed her. There should be a flower garland around Guru Maharaj's neck. The tilak should be yellowish, not white, and there should be no effulgence or halo around his head. So I would like to reflect here on this. He writes that this young guy Dan was at the Swami's lecture, and Prabhupada was speaking how sexual desire causes bondage and suffering. So, and then Dan was shocked, and he was not really liking very much that the followers of Prabhupada were celibate. So I remember before I came to the first Hare Krishna programs, I visited a few times a group of another Indian followers of another Indian guru, and they were showing meditation and mantras, and then he introduced this idea that sexuality should not be practiced outside marriage, and that with every orgasm one loses something which will never later be gained. And this was like something very new, because everything what we learn is completely different. And I remember one colleague of mine from the university was on this group too, and after this program he told me, I asked him, how do you like this class? And he said, I like this song that they are singing, but this celibate thing, this is not really for me. And he never came again. So this is showing how this sexual desire is the strongest weapon of Maya, of Krishna's illusory energy, and this is the one that is most binding to this material world. And this is what we should appreciate, that Srila Prabhupada gave us all this knowledge about the regulative principles, because we need regulation so that we can practice spiritual life. And Srila Prabhupada created all this. We are now in a society, association with people who are practicing spiritual life, and it's easy to do it when we are surrounded with these people. Just like if we want to learn a foreign language, if we just come to the foreign country and we can just listen, and we will automatically learn the language. So in this way we are now, Prabhupada created this spiritual country in which we, by some good fortune, we came, and we can just listen to devotees speaking, and we will learn this spiritual language very easily just by listening. We listen to the mantra, we listen to Srimad Bhagavatam, the katha, the stories of the great devotees, and it's very easy to practice it. And we can see how different it is from everything in the material world. we saw yesterday, we came to tour and we saw people who were on a Saturday night partying, fever, and everyone is in the bars and everyone is enjoying this irregulated life, and we can remember how painful it is, how we used to live it, and how painful it was just there is a big ecstasy on Saturday night, but then Sunday morning is not so ecstatic usually. And and then Harinam came into this square where there were all these pubs, and it was so amazing how this contrast, how these old people who are like morning faces and devotees coming and jumping and dancing, and it's like a flash of light coming into a very dark place, and at the first time it was like some explosion, but then it began, the atmosphere softened, and people some were hopping and some were singing, and so it's very special. And this there is in Muslim scriptures, there was a prophet who anticipated, who said, I don't know how many hundreds of years ago, that now in this age that there will be a prostitute dancing in every household, in every home. So what does it mean? We have in every home TV, and we know what is on TV, and even in the public places there is so much nudity, and this is it, the prostitute is dancing, and but we created this prostitute, we let the women be put into this position, because in Vedic society the women have a position of a mother, and today everyone is reducing woman to an Amazonian woman, and everyone is admiring this Amazonian, but the mother is almost completely forgotten. So we have this wonderful society where women are regarded as mothers and protected, and then this sexual desire is not only the gross sexual desire, but it is the subtle sexuality, which is the desire to dominate. And we were hearing this wonderful class of Dhananjay Prabhu, who were speaking how we need to look for Vaishnava qualities in everyone around us, and so this way to conquer our sexual desire, and which comes in this propensity of finding faults in others, putting others down, dominating by criticizing, is we can overcome it by seeing in each person, to find one or two Vaishnava qualities, and appreciating it and remembering. This is how we can overcome this. Okay, sorry for this. So I will continue, and please be free if you have some commentaries, if you like to add something, please raise your hand. And Bob says, I began chanting and studying the Srimad Bhagavatam at home and attending the kirtan and classes at the storefront. After the last kirtan in the evening, the Swami would take a bowl made of simulated wood and a litter paring knife and a couple of apples that had been sitting on the edge of his lectern, and he would cut the apples up in the little bowl and hand the bowl to a disciple. The disciple would then offer him the first piece, and he would pop it into his mouth. The rest of the pieces of apple would be distributed to the crowd. I remember one time when he was chewing on his piece of apple and he spit the seeds out on the floor up against the wall. They bounced off the wall onto the floor next to the days. And I was thinking, how wonderful! No one else can do that. No one else would have the nerve to do such a thing. With his aesthetic filmmaker's eye, Dan appreciated Swamiji's manner. Then, there was a sink right next to the dais where he sat. It was so close that he could have leaned over and touched it. After cutting up an apple, he would take the scraps and just fling them into the sink. It was very casual. I was very impressed by that. And one time Brahmananda came up and wanted 50 cents for something, and the Swami reached down and picked up his little black purse, the kind that closes by a metal clasp at the top. He snapped it open, looked inside very perspicaciously, and then his hand came up like a bird, like an eagle hovering in flight above its prey. But the hand didn't pounce. It just delicately drifted down, took out a 50-cent piece, and rose up again as if it were being lifted up on a balloon. It was graceful. It was a dance, a ballet. He just picked up this 50-cent piece and lifted it into Brahmananda's hand. I couldn't believe it. Someone asks you for a 50-cent piece, you just dig in your pockets and throw it at them. But the Swami seemed to treat everything as Krishna's property, and this 50-cent piece was treated with such care.
No.
Wow.
Yeah. Very Krishna conscious.
Amazing. They say that Prabhupada was very aristocratic in his movements, his gestures, that he was like a swan. He was like this, and everything, each little gesture, every gesture was like spiritual, or like a person who is not out of this world. The weeks went by. Some of the devotees had spoken to Bob about initiation, but he was unsure. He didn't know exactly what initiation was, but it seemed to him that the other devotees were eager to get him initiated, because he was working and had a family. To Bob's way of thinking, he represented maturity to them, a middle-class American, and they were eager to land him. Bob's wife wasn't interested, and his friends were downright opposed. He couldn't spend much time with Prabhupada or the devotees, since he was either at the office or at home with his family. Both. So they were asking me if I was interested in initiation. I said I would think about it. I hadn't stopped smoking. I hadn't made the final decision. The first real personal exchange I had with the Swami was when I asked for initiation. The rest of the time, I was so much in awe of him that it didn't occur to me to say anything. I always wanted to. I felt puffed up, and I always thought, Well, I should be able to talk to him. Maybe I should do something. But I was kind of reluctant to do it. I didn't think it was my place. I guess maybe I was afraid. But I was getting up early and chanting 32 rounds a day. Wow, 32 rounds. Many of them on the subway.
And he wasn't sure. Wasn't even sure about Krishna consciousness. But he was chanting 32 rounds really. Even we are sure I was thinking about 16 rounds.
Wow. I was afraid of the material world because I didn't have much association with devotees, and I wanted to insulate myself by chanting more. Judy was another person who was considering initiation, and I asked her what she was going to do about it, and she said, "I'm thinking about it." And then she told me she had decided she would get initiated and give up all her bad habits. I began to think, maybe I could give up these things too. So I asked what to do. How do I approach him? And Kirtanananda said, "Well, you go up to his room." I was surprised it was so easy. I had prepared a little speech in my mind. Quote, "My dear Swamiji, would you kindly accept me as your disciple and teach me about Krishna consciousness?" I went up to his room without an appointment and knocked on the door. I heard him say, "Come in." I entered the room and he was sitting behind his desk. He was alone. I made obeisances and he looked at me and said, "Yes?" And I said, "Swamiji, will you make me your disciple?" And that's as far as I got. I was going to say, "And teach me the philosophy of Krishna consciousness." But he didn't let me finish my speech. He said, "Yes." It was so simple. I thought, well, there's nothing else to say. He has accepted me. So I thanked him and paid my obeisances and left. You know you're not supposed to be up here unless you're initiated, Achyutananda said. Judy was flustered. She had come upstairs to put some dirty pots in the kitchen. "Oh yes," she replied. "That's just what I wanted to talk to Swamiji about." And she went into Prabhupada's room, where he was talking with a few other people. "Swamiji, could I please get initiated?" she asked. And he said, "Do you know the 4 rules?" "Yes." "Can you follow them?" "Yes." "Then you can be initiated in 2 weeks." Dan was also thinking about initiation, but he wanted to wait. He was chanting 16 rounds and attending all the classes, despite his reluctant wife. He had always had difficulty with authority figures, but he could feel that the Swami was winning him over and bearing down his impersonal barrier. 2 weeks later, Prabhupada held another initiation ceremony. Bob became Rupanuga and Judy became Jadurani. Dan needed a little more time.
So Judy became Jadurani, she became a painter, and she became the wife of Satsarupdas Goswami,
Oh,
the devotee who wrote this book. The book we are reading,
yeah,
it was written by Satsarupdas
yeah.
Goswami, and she became the wife of Satru Maharaj
Uh-huh.
for 6 years,
Oh.
5-6 years. I just wanted to mention
Uh-huh.
this early beginning, 66.
They were married for 6 years.
Sadhguru Maharaj took sannyasi in May 1972 in Los Angeles with Hridayanath Maharaj. So from this, he got married very quickly because Prabhupada didn't want the couple to stay unmarried. So they got married quickly in 1972. From 66, 72, yeah, roughly 5-6 years. 6 years.
So this is one point how devotees were trying to convince Bob to take initiation. So this is what happens, that devotees always are kindly pushing us.
Kindly pushing.
And this is actually nice, and but we should always appreciate it, that this kind push is there. And for myself, I more times I felt like my mind was disturbed by this pushing, and thinking, why are they like pushing me that I do more service? But actually then, if we pray and by Krishna's mercy we succeed in taking this push as a nice challenge, then we can develop our abilities and do more than we could do, and we feel ecstatic because this is what Krishna wants. Krishna wants us to give everything, to give the things that we don't need, because we free then. We feel connected, we feel free.
We go to the next chapter.
No, yeah. You have any comments?
I didn't understand everything in English, so I tried to, but
What
my
was?
English is not so good that I can understand everything.
Oh, sorry, I should have spoken.
No, that's great. I practice my English then.
C'est quoi que vous n'avez pas compris?
J'ai, je pense, saisi l'idée principale. J'ai vu qu'il y avait l'histoire de sexe, d'addiction, de gens qui étaient pris par des choses comme ça, et qui rencontraient quelqu'un qui était adepte de Krishna, et qu'il y avait des échanges entre eux, et que du coup il y en a ces personnes qui avaient des problèmes d'addiction adhéraient au mouvement et cessaient, n'avaient plus d'addiction, quoi. Mais après les détails, je les ai pas, j'ai pas tellement. C'est ça, non?
C'est sûr, ouais. Vous avez bien compris.
C'est tout ça.
Vous avez bien compris.
Après c'est les subtilités et
Il a dit quelque chose d'important, c'est que tout est basé sur l'association. De la même manière, si vous voulez apprendre une langue étrangère, si vous allez habiter dans le pays, vous serez plus à même d'apprendre la langue dans le pays.
Oui, c'est sûr.
Et pour la conscience de Krishna, pour la spiritualité, c'est pareil. Si on veut devenir un dévot, l'association des Vaishnavas, des dévots, est primordiale. Parce que quand on vient les dévots, on finit par développer des qualités spirituelles des gens qui nous entourent.
Bien
Donc,
sûr.
vraiment, tout est basé sur l'association.
S'assemble.
Oui, qui se ressemblent, s'assemblent. Tout est basé sur l'association.
Et oui.
Voilà. C'est le commentaire que je voulais faire parce que c'est tellement important. On voit l'énergie externe et l'énergie interne. Voilà, donc. Et puis, tu disais sur la tour, là. La tour, quand tu es allé faire Harina. Est-ce qu'on va chanter dans les rues?
Oui, hier je devais y aller, je ne suis pas allée, j'étais trop fatiguée en fait.
D'accord.
Je ne me suis pas sentie d'y aller, j'irai sans doute samedi prochain.
C'est deux mondes qui se rencontrent.
Ouais.
C'est deux mondes qui se rencontrent, deux mondes, l'énergie externe, l'énergie interne, et les dévots, ils arrivent, ils vont dans le café, ils vont dans les places où les gens boivent de l'alcool, fument, c'est toxique. C'est vraiment deux mondes qui se rencontrent, voilà.
Ouais, puis au début, il doit y avoir une sorte d'appréhension, de peur des gens.
Ça fait, c'est un choc.
Oui, c'est
choc
ça.
Culturel.
Ouais, c'est
choc
ça.
Culturel.
Les gens doivent complètement être freinés.
C'est comme quand on va en Inde pour la première fois. On reçoit un choc culturel.
Ouais, c'est ça.
Quand on va en Inde pour la première fois. Qui que ce soit.
Ben oui, ça c'est sûr, c'est inévitable.
Qui que ce soit.
D'accord.
Oui, je parlais comme dans le monde, dans notre culture occidentale, c'est... je parlais que comment cet désir sexuel est le plus puissant weapon, arme de Maya,
l'énergie illusoire.
de énergie illusoire, oui.
D'énergie illusoire.
L'énergie illusoire, oui.
Ouais.
Tout le monde est plongé dans l'illusion. On voit.
D'accord.
Et comment c'est dit dans les écritures musulmanes comme dans cet âge, dans chaque maison, une prostituée va danser. Et c'est ce qui se passe, que les femmes sont réduites à la rôle d'un objet sexuel.
Objet de plaisir. Voilà.
Et dans la culture védique, on doit voir chaque femme comme sa mère, sauf
l'épouse.
Sauf l'épouse, oui. Et c'est
Sauf l'épouse.
L'épouse, oui. Toutes les femmes sont nos mères, sauf l'épouse.
D'accord.
c'est très précieux que Prabhupada a formé cette maison pour nous où les femmes sont protégées et sont données le respect.
D'accord, mais est-ce que ça implique du coup que les femmes respectent certaines règles? Par exemple, dans le monde musulman, bon, bah, ça va être le voile. Dans les cas dans les cas les plus sectaires, on va dire, hein, enfin, je vais dire ça. Les femmes sont obligées de rester à la maison, pas trop le droit de sortir. Vous, est-ce qu'il y a des règles, enfin chez vous, est-ce qu'il y a des règles comme ça à respecter? Est-ce que...
Donc pas aussi extrême.
Ouais.
Pas aussi extrême. On n'est pas musulmans.
Hein? Mais du coup, partout. Du coup, comment ça se passe à ce niveau-là? Enfin, est-ce qu'il y a des interdictions? Est-ce que les femmes ont des interdictions quelconques en ce qui concerne les liens sociaux, toutes les activités qu'on pourrait avoir à mener en société?
Alors, il y a beaucoup de règles dans la culture védique, mais toutes les règles sont là pour nous aider de développer l'amour de Dieu, développer l'amour au Krishna. Et,
ouais.
Il y a des règles que la femme ne peut pas sortir et aller dans la ville, sortir de la maison sans être avec un homme, avec un mari ou fils. Mais il y a beaucoup de règles, mais on peut, Prabhupada dit, time, place, circumstance. Le temps, la place et les circonstances. On ne peut pas juste prendre les règles comme ça, on va ajuster à notre culture, où nous vivons. Et Prabhupada était très innovatif, très progressif. Il a changé beaucoup de règles védiques. Il a donné les femmes les deuxièmes initiations, qu'elles peuvent faire le service au hôtel. C'était incroyable pour l'Inde.
D'accord.
Et voilà.
Bon, ça, dans le catholicisme, c'est pareil. Hein. Ce sont des hommes qui...
Oui, les femmes ne peuvent pas devenir prêtres.
Non. Ben non, ils ne peuvent pas faire les messes en fait.
Faire les messes. Donc ici, les femmes peuvent donner les classes, elles peuvent faire les messes ici.
Ah d'accord.
Elles peuvent aller sur l'autel.
Ok.
Mais dans la culture védique, alors dans notre culture occidentale, ce rôle de femme est changé et c'est aussi Maya que les femmes sont rôles sont changés et dans la culture védique, la femme a un rôle très important de éduquer les enfants, parce que c'est l'homme qui reçoit la connaissance spirituelle de gourou et le mari il donne cette connaissance à sa femme et aux enfants et il travaille, il gagne de l'argent pour faire la sécurité de la famille et la femme est à la maison et elle s'occupe des enfants. Et c'est très important que les enfants sont bien éduqués et que la femme a l'obligation de faire une atmosphère de bon augure dans la maison, de faire puja, d'avoir les déités, qu'il y a de propreté, de l'ordre dans la maison, qui donne une atmosphère spirituelle.
D'accord. Et c'est pas interchangeable. Ça n'existe pas. Le contraire n'est pas possible. Enfin, je veux dire, c'est vraiment le rôle de la femme de s'occuper des enfants et l'homme. Il participe, j'imagine, à l'éducation des enfants aussi.
Oui, l'homme donne la connaissance spirituelle et voilà, il s'occupe les deux. Et en fait,
Mais est-ce qu'un homme, par exemple, va faire des corvées à l'intérieur de la maison Est-ce qu'un homme va faire des corvées à l'intérieur de la maison Par exemple, est-ce qu'un homme va mettre une machine en route ou faire une vaisselle
la cuisine
ou faire la cuisine? Je vois qu'ici, il y a beaucoup d'hommes qui font la cuisine. Oui. Mais est-ce que au sein d'un foyer, je crois que les gens s'arrangent un peu comme ils veulent. Il n'y a pas franchement de règles non plus.
Oui, c'est ça. Oui, strict.
J'imagine, parce que ça, ce que tu viens de décrire, c'est comme ça. C'est comme ça partout en fait, hein. Ça s'est un peu perdu, mais bon, la femme, elle est, enfin, même dans la culture française, à la base, la femme, c'est ce qu'elle est censée faire. Dans la culture française,
oui.
À la base, la femme, c'est ce qu'elle est censée faire, hein. Rester à la maison. C'est ce qu'elle est censée faire, qu'elle devrait faire.
What they were supposed to do.
Yes, that's right. Like before everybody get a little bit crazy and nobody knows if he's a boy or a girl or what who he is. Before it was like that, like the woman had to stay in the house to take care of the child and to put a good vibes in the house. So that's not really different actually.
Yeah, it's very natural.
Parce que la société s'est tellement dégradée ces dernières années.
Ouais, c'est ça, c'est
tout
que
a
maintenant.
été mis à l'envers.
Plus du tout pareil. Il y a le mot yel. Vous savez ça, non?
Il y a quelques années, c'était.
Vous connaissez, vous êtes au courant qu'il y a un nouveau mot il y a un nouveau pronom personnel dans la langue française, vous le savez ça?
Ah non,
tu sais pas?
Ah non, on n'est pas au courant, nous.
Alors c'est Yel.
Yel.
E,
E,
I, L.
E, I, L.
Mais ils sont en train de se plaindre parce que moi je.
Non, ne t'inquiétez pas, c'est à 10h. C'est un peu plus tard.
Ah ouais, là,
C'est-
nous on n'a pas changé d'heure.
C'est après le petit déjeuner, on change d'heure après.
Ouais, c'est ça, parce que moi j'ai 10h, mais en fait il n'est pas 10h.
Non, ici on change un peu plus tard.
D'accord. Donc Yel,
E, I, L.
E, I, L.
Comme
Il
l'œil.
se rajoute, non, comme il et elle
E, I, L.
attachés ensemble.
D'accord, oui, c'est transgenre ça, c'est ça le
Ouais, transgenre ou comment on appelle ça, non-binaire.
non-binaire. Ouais. Waouh. Maya fait des dégâts. Hein. Maya fait des
Là,
dégâts.
là, les jeunes et tout ça, ils disent que c'est un système non-binaire.
Binaire, c'est d'accord.
Créativité de Maya.
Ouais, Maya fait des dégâts, c'est impressionnant.
C'est qui Maya en fait? Parce que moi je connais les Mayas, Maya d'Amérique du Sud. Mais sinon, Maya,
Tu vois, il y a la connexion aussi.
Les Mayas sont revenus. Hein.
les Mayas sont revenus, c'est qui les Mayas?
Ouais, c'est une énergie illusoire, c'est quoi?
Énergie de quoi?
Illusoire.
Ah,
Qui planche dans
qui nous fait croire des trucs.
Oui.
Oui, on n'est pas au courant parce que nous on vit dans le monde spirituel, vous savez.
Ben oui, je sais.
Vous avez compris.
L'énergie de Krishna, hein, Maya.
Ah, d'accord. Et qui crée
L'illusion.
l'illusion.
Qui crée l'illusion, voilà.
L'illusion.
Vous l'avez quelque part ici en photo ou en dessin? C'est une personne?
Oui, c'est une personne.
Elle est où? Elle est où cette personne?
Elle est partout.
Ah, mais vous n'avez pas d'image d'elle là? Parce que comme il y a des
L'image
images.
externe.
Il y a l'image différente.
Ah, c'est une autre image?
Durga.
Durga.
Oui.
Durga.
Ouais.
Durga, c'est
C'est quoi le
Durga.
un demi-dieu avec beaucoup de
Bras.
Ah, des bras?
avec
Ah oui.
des arbres.
Ah oui, j'ai déjà vu tous ces bras.
EIL. Tu connaissais EIL, toi, tu as déjà parlé?
Non, jamais.
Yel, pas Yel.
Tu as dit E-I-L.
Non, t'as dit EIL.
C'est I-E-L.
T'as dit
Yel, oui, c'est ça, I-E-L.
Ah bon,
c'est
parce
ça.
que E-I-L, c'est L.
Ouais, donc non.
T'as dit
non.
EIL.
Oui, je me suis
non, c'est
trompée.
pas possible.
Je me suis trompée.
C'est I-E-L.
I-E-L.
EL.
C'est
D'accord.
I-E-L, c'est Yel.
Non, j'ai jamais entendu parler de ça.
Moi non
Non,
plus.
c'est vrai.
Non.
Ben non.
Je suis en ringard.
IEL.
Alors,
Tiens,
pardonnez-moi, je dois
Oui.
finir ici parce
Bien
que
sûr.
je dois
Pardon.
aller.
Bien sûr.
Et vous pouvez continuer à parler si vous voulez. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Oui, merci pour la traduction.
Et Shrimad Shla Prabhupada Lilamrita ki jai, Shla Prabhupada ki jai, Satsarubhas Goswami ki jai.
Merci, Prabhu.
Merci.
Avec
Oh.
il n'y a plus d'exception maintenant. On ne sait pas si c'est une homme ou une femme, c'est ça?
De quoi?
Il n'y a plus de distinction. On ne sait pas si c'est une homme ou une femme.
C'est ça. En fait, le terme Yel, mais c'est rentré dans le dictionnaire. Hein.
C'est terrible.
Ça va être rentré dans le dictionnaire, ce truc.
Waouh, ça se dégrade vraiment.
Et
Maya, on est partout.
parce qu'il n'est plus question d'imposer une vision
Sexiste.
voilà, de type
Oui, le
discriminatoire en fait.
Discriminatoire.
Masculin l'emporte sur le féminin, on veut plus de ça.
Voilà, c'est ça. On veut plus
On
que
veut
le
plus.
masculin l'emporte sur le féminin.
Alors, on
Ça
va
doit
changer
plus
les
exister,
règles de
ces
grammaire
trucs.
et tout alors.
Ben, en fait, oui,
Ouais.
ouais, je crois que
C'est
tout ce
terrible.
qui est accord participe passé,
Ouais.
tu sais, verbe avoir, gna gna gna, être, tout ça, ça va être supprimé en fait.
Déjà,
Waouh.
les enfants qui font des fautes de grammaire, on les compte pas maintenant.
Ah non, 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 non,
C'est fini ça.
non, non.
Ils peuvent faire plein de fautes.
On continue.
Non mais c'est
Mais de toute façon, il ne faut pas besoin d'apprendre à écrire.
réaliste pour nous.
Ah ouais, nous on vit sur notre planète.
Ah oui, complètement. Oui.
Ah ouais, c'est vrai.